What's going on, guys? In a recent ride-along video that I did with my 636, I was posting up the question of whether or not riding a middleweight sport bike was more fun than riding a leader class bike. And I guess in a weird twist of irony, I couldn't get to the points that I was trying to make in that ride-along video because I was having too much fun with the 636. I'll post up a link in the description below so that what I'm saying makes any sense. But anyway, I wanted to dive into this topic a little bit because leader bikes today are not the leader bikes that we had 15, 20 years ago. Far from it, as a matter of fact. And the distance between a leader bike from today and a middleweight bike today is far more vast than it was back in the day. I mean, look at it like this. Middleweights really haven't changed all that much. Top of the food chain, middleweight puts down somewhere around, say, 130 horsepower to the rear tire. That's a very healthy middleweight. Well, nowadays, leader bikes put down, once they're de-restricted and piped and all of that, they're around 185. I mean, it's a 50 plus horsepower difference. And you might think that that's just insurmountable. But you got to remember, we don't ride dynos and we don't ride spec sheets. It's about the actual riding experience. And as somebody that owns a GSXR 1000 and has graduated up through the ranks into 1000, well, I've got a really good idea between the two different classes of bikes. But who I'm really talking to for right now in this video is, well, you might find this familiar if you're watching this and you've got a leader bike and you're finding yourself in a position where maybe you feel like you might have bitten off a little bit more than you can chew. And this is a lot of guys that have leader bikes. You'll find that the guys will buy these bikes because it's a bit of an ego brush, but the reality is that they get on these bikes, and although the power is a rush, they get real sketched out about getting that bike on the side of the tire because they're not used to that kind of power. They're not experienced enough with track days or fast street riding. And so you'll find that these guys, well, they'll end up moving away from motorcycling altogether because they don't want to go down from the leader bike because they feel like they're going to be missing out on something. But the reality is, again, that although on paper there's a huge difference between the two bikes, let's talk about it because you might find that the middleweight bike is not only more fun, but it's more practical. And, well, let's be honest, it's going to be the better street bike in a lot of different ways. First of all, if you're getting rid of your leader bike and you're thinking about one of the middleweights, and it's the 636, GSXR 750, R9, doesn't matter, they're going to have a more compliant suspension. The leader bikes all have a stiffer suspension. That's to deal with the higher loads and the higher velocities that you would see on track. That's on track, mind you, not on street. Where middleweight bikes are more softly sprung because they don't have to deal with the same kinds of loads, but that makes them a much better street bike. They can deal with the things that the street will throw at you that the track won't. Things like expansion joints, bumps, undulations. You've got different types of imperfections in the road. All these things affect the dynamics of the motorcycle, whether you're upright or you got the thing on the side of the tire. A more compliant suspension with a good hydraulic setup is always going to be better for the street because you'll be able to push that bike much harder through corners. It'll be a lot safer on the side of the tire going through any corner because the suspension will be able to deal with whatever the street is going to throw at it. Leader class bikes, man, they're set up stiff and they have a tendency to jar you. It took me a long time to get my first GSXR 1000 sorted out to where I didn't feel like it was trying to break bones every time I rode that thing over an expansion joint. So already point for the middleweight. It's a better suspension setup for the street. Now, you may say, well, it's a softer suspension setup. Maybe that means it's going to be less stable going through my favorite fast, long bends. Not at all. That more compliant suspension, again, works at the higher speeds as well, allowing that motorcycle to be able to deal with any imperfections and be nice and smooth as opposed to being hard and rigid going through those types of traverses that you might be running it through. And that's really where that whole streetability thing begins with the middleweight. It's not just better because it's got a more compliant suspension. Middleweights are going to be more aggressively geared. And because they're more aggressively geared, it makes them easier to ride in traffic. It makes them easier to ride in and around town. Leader bikes, these things will do 100 miles an hour almost, or just the other side of, in first gear. That's crazy, right? So it means you're going to be a lot more on the clutch. You're going to be a lot more lugging that leader bike just cruising in and around town if you find yourself doing that a lot with that bike. Again, point for the middleweight. But the gearing, since we're on this subject, does a lot in narrowing the delta in performance between the two bikes. Yes, the leader bike makes a ton more power, but if you don't have the power, but you've got the RPM and you've got really aggressive gearing, well, you can make that bike accelerate really hard. And as it stands, well, the 636 has 33% more aggressive gearing than the GSXR 1000. That's a lot. So to put that into illustrative purposes, going down the highway at 100 miles an hour, GSXR 1000 will be turning 7,500 RPM. You've got to add 33% to your 7,500 RPM to get it to the 10,000 RPM that this thing would be turning with stock gearing at 100 miles an hour. See what I'm saying? So you've got the advantage in terms of gearing that helps you in and around town, but man, you've got an acceleration that is getting eerily close to that leader bike in certain scenarios with your middleweight. I'm not saying it hangs with the leader bike in terms of acceleration. That would be insane. But we're getting close. And, oh yeah, middleweights typically rev a little bit higher. The 636, once you de-restrict it, is going to spin to about 15,000 RPM. GSXR 1000, say 13,500. That's really if you're pushing it. So realistically speaking, you got a couple of thousand RPM, give or take, of revs, and you've got about 33% more aggressive gearing. Man, now all of a sudden that middleweight's starting to look pretty good. They're spicy to ride, very aggressively geared. They spin to the moon, and they're very silky. The engine is not buzzy at all. It's smaller, so you don't get those secondary vibrations going through the foot pegs or the handlebars. It's really nice in that respect. So again, add it to the comfortability and the streetability of the middleweight. In terms of handling, oh, come on, give me a break. The middleweight's got you covered. Now, it's not just because it's lighter, because it is going to be lighter, but it's got a smaller rear tire. They typically have a shorter wheelbase as well. So they're extremely flickable. You can do transitions and directions very fast with these middleweights. Makes them a ball to ride, even at the speed limit. That's the thing. With the middleweight, even going at slower speeds or more sane speeds becomes a bit of an event. Leader bikes, man, they are a riot. Again, I'll have to say it just for effect. I'm a huge leader bike fan. I own one. But the thing is that, well, unless you're pushing that bike, you really don't get a sense of the kind of performance that that machine is actually capable of. Whereas the middleweight, you're always able to play with it, and you're always able to row the thing through the gears and just have a ball with it in general. You get the sight and you get the sound and you get everything else out of this bike. And, well, I haven't mentioned it yet, at a bargain price. 636 sitting behind me, stickers out at about $11,400. Any of the leader class bikes that you would want to buy, at least the Japanese ones, you're still looking at a minimum of $17,500 or $18,000 for the bike that, well, you might not be able to use all of. And that's the other thing. If we're talking about stock bikes, these motorcycles are all restricted in some way, shape, or form, but yeah, I got to tell you, in restricted stock form, the GSXR 1000, well, it really is a good middleweight, if you think about it, because it'll put down 150 horsepower to the rear tire as it sits bone stock. But for a fraction of the cost, you can get a 636, do everything that you want to do to it, velocity stacks, exhaust, tune, whatever, filter, and you're putting down close to 130. Now the difference in power is only 20? Wow, and you've done it for a fraction of the cost. So the thing is that don't sell your middleweight short. They are a riot to ride. They handle exceptionally well. They're very stable at speed. They're comfortable, and you get all of that for a fraction of the cost. Little wonder why the middleweight sport bike class is starting to grow very quickly in popularity. We've got Chinese manufacturers coming into the conversation. We've got the GSXR family of middleweights, the 600 and 750, rumored to be updated in 2027. The CBR 600 is still rocking it out there, and the only manufacturer that's not making a 600 class right now, Japanese-wise, is Yamaha, but you got your R9. So these motorcycles are gaining in popularity. The super stock class of racing is becoming much more popular. I can see why so many guys are gravitating towards these bikes, but make no mistake, if you're coming from a leader bike point of view, you'll never have the power output. You'll never have that rush out of the middleweight. But everywhere else in the performance envelope, the middleweight has, I don't want to say it's got you covered, but it's kind of got you covered. And where it doesn't, it's awfully close. Way more close than it should be based on the cost and based on the spec sheet. But with that, guys, hope you had a good time with this video. I sure did. If you made it this far in the video, consider smashing that subscribe button. Helps the channel out a ton. But with that, guys, I'm going to wrap it up. Y'all take care.